The evening had been full of warmth. Emily's small suburban home smelled of roasted chicken, fresh bread, and apple pie. The dining table was crowded with plates, glasses, and crumbs left behind from laughter-filled conversations. Her family and friends had gathered, filling every corner of the house with voices that reminded her of better times. She had worked hard all day, making sure everyone felt at home, smiling through every moment. Even when her heart felt heavy, when the last guest hugged her goodbye and the front door finally closed, silence swept in. It was the kind of silence that felt both comforting and unbearable at once. Emily leaned against the door for a moment, her chest rising and falling as she let the stillness sink in. She was proud of herself for another successful family dinner, but once the laughter was gone, she felt the emptiness echo louder than before. She moved into the living room. Picking up empty cups and folded napkins left on the couch, her body was tired, but her mind wouldn't rest. This had become a routine: hosting, smiling, cleaning, and then sitting alone in the quiet. Her husband had been gone for 3 years, yet the house still felt like it was waiting for him to walk in. But tonight was different. Her son, Daniel, hadn't left with the others. He was still there, standing near the window, his tall frame outlined by the faint glow of the porch light outside. Emily noticed him, but didn't say anything at first. She assumed he was just giving her a few minutes before he offered to help clean up. That's what he usually did. But something about the way he stood, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense, made her pause. Daniel was 32 now. No longer the boy who used to chase a basketball down the street or sit at the kitchen table with homework spread everywhere. He had grown into a man who carried responsibility in his voice and care in his eyes. Emily often looked at him with quiet pride, knowing he had inherited his father's steadiness. "Daniel," she finally said, balancing a stack of plates in her hands, "you don't have to stay. Go home and rest. You've got work tomorrow." But he didn't move. His gaze stayed on her, serious, almost searching. Then he stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "Mom, I didn't stay to help clean up." Emily froze for a second, her eyes narrowing in confusion. She set the plates on the counter and turned to face him fully. His words carried a weight that made her chest tighten. "I stayed," he continued, "because I need to talk to you. And what I have to say, it might change everything." Her breath caught. Daniel had never spoken to her like this before. He had always been caring, yes, but not this intense, not this deliberate. She searched his face for clues, her heart racing with questions she couldn't put into words. The kitchen light hummed above them, casting a pale glow across the room. Emily's fingers trembled as she wiped them on a dish towel. She tried to steady her voice, though it came out weaker than she wanted. "Change everything." "What do you mean?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes soft but firm, carrying a determination that made Emily uneasy. It wasn't the kind of conversation she expected at the end of a family dinner. It wasn't casual. It was something deeper, something he had been carrying for a while. Emily felt the air in the room shift. She could sense that the night wasn't over, not yet. Her son had stayed behind for a reason, and whatever it wasn't small. She pulled out a chair and sat down at the table, suddenly needing the stability of the wooden seat beneath her. Daniel joined her, sitting across from her with his hands resting on the table. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Emily wanted to push him to explain, but she couldn't find the strength. She knew that once the words left his mouth, there would be no going back. And yet, something inside her whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the conversation she had been avoiding for years. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice softer now. "Mom, I need to tell you something important." The weight of his words pressed against her chest. Emily folded her hands together tightly. "Yes," bracing herself for whatever was about to come. For years, she had lived with her heart carefully locked away. She had hidden her pain behind smiles, behind Sunday dinners, behind small conversations with neighbors. But now, sitting across from her son, she realized those walls were about to be tested. Emily sat at the table, her hands folded tightly together, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. She had no idea what Daniel was about to say, but the seriousness in his eyes made her feel like her whole world was about to shift. Daniel leaned forward. Elbows resting on the table? His voice was calm, steady, but filled with something heavier than usual. Mom, I need you to listen without pushing me away. This isn't easy for me to say, but I can't keep quiet anymore. Emily swallowed hard, her throat dry. She nodded slowly, urging him to continue. You've been alone for too long, Daniel said softly. Every time I come here, every time I see you after one of these dinners, I can tell. You smile for everyone, you cook, you laugh, but the moment the house empties out, I see it in your eyes. You're a lonely mom, and I can't ignore it anymore. His words pierced her more than she expected. She opened her mouth to argue, to brush it off, but the lump in her throat stopped her. She pressed her lips together, blinking quickly as tears threatened to form. I'm fine, Daniel, she whispered, her voice trembling. He shook his head firmly. No, Mom, you're not fine. You're surviving. You deserve more than that. Dad wouldn't want you to live this way, just going through the motions. Pretending you're okay when you're not? Emily's breath hitched. The mention of her husband, gone for 3 years now, cut through her like a knife. She had spent so long avoiding that thought, avoiding the idea that she might have a life beyond grief. She stood up quickly, walking toward the sink, needing something to do with her hands. She grabbed a glass and filled it with water, though she barely drank. Her back was turned, but she could feel Daniel's eyes on her. You don't understand, she said quietly, staring at the water in her glass. It's not that simple. When you lose someone you've built your whole life with, the idea of moving forward feels impossible. It feels wrong. Daniel rose from his chair, his voice more gentle now. I do understand, Mom. I miss Dad too. Every day. But grief doesn't mean your life ended with his. You're still here, and you still deserve happiness. Emily gripped the counter tighter, fighting back the tears. Her son was right, and that truth made it harder to breathe. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You've given me everything. You raised me, you kept this family strong, even when it was falling apart. But who's taking care of you? Who's making sure you have someone to lean on? Emily turned then, her eyes glistening. I have you, she said, her voice breaking. Daniel shook his head. I'm your son. And yes, I'll always be here. But you need more than that. You need someone who sees you. Not just as a mother, not just as a widow, but as a woman who deserves love again. Her chest tightened, her heart aching with emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. The thought of love, of companionship, seemed like something meant for someone else, someone younger, someone braver. Daniel, she whispered, shaking her head. I can't. I wouldn't even know how. But Daniel didn't back down. His eyes softened, but his words were steady. You don't have to know how. You just have to be willing to try. Emily's knees felt weak. She sank back into her chair, covering her face with her hands. The tears came freely now, spilling down her cheeks as years of loneliness caught up to her. She hated that her son was right. She hated that he could see straight through her carefully built walls. Daniel sat across from her again, his hand reaching out to rest gently on hers. Mom, I didn't stay tonight to make you cry. I stayed because I need you to hear the truth. You're not as invisible as you think. There's someone who sees you, someone who cares about you. Emily's head shot up, her eyes wide with confusion. What do you mean? Daniel held her gaze, steady and unflinching. I've already spoken to someone. Someone who wants to meet you. Her heart stopped for a moment. The words seemed impossible to process. She blinked at him, searching his face for answers. Someone, she repeated, her voice barely audible. Yes, Daniel said firmly. Someone who's cared about you for a long time. Someone who respects you. I wouldn't be saying this if I didn't believe it could make a difference in your life. Emily's mind raced. She felt a mix of fear, shock, and a strange flutter of hope she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know whether to scold him for interfering in her life, or to cling to the lifeline he was. Offering, the silence stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the ticking clock. Finally, Emily whispered, Daniel, who? Daniel leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he exhaled slowly, his voice calm but firm. His name is Michael. Emily's breath caught, her fingers tightening on the edge of the table. A name from the past. A memory she had buried deep, suddenly rising to the surface. Emily stared at Daniel, her heart racing as the name left his lips. Michael. It had been years since she had heard that name spoken in her home. A rush of memories came back: summer barbecues where Michael had stood beside her husband. The laughter they shared in the backyard. The way his eyes sometimes lingered on her when he thought no one was watching. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed them together. Michael, she whispered, almost afraid to believe what she had just heard. Daniel nodded. His expression was steady, but his voice softened. Yes, Mom. Michael, Dad's closest friend. He's never forgotten you. Emily's chest tightened. She remembered how, after her husband's funeral, Michael had come by once with flowers, standing awkwardly at her door, offering condolences. He had wanted to say more, she could feel it then, but instead, he had disappeared, leaving her to grieve in silence. She always assumed it was because being around her was too painful, a reminder of the friend he had lost. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Why are you telling me this now? Daniel leaned forward, his tone firm but full of care. Because, Mom, he asked me once if you would ever be open to talking. I didn't know what to say then. You weren't ready, and I didn't want to push you. But he's waited. And I can't watch you go on like this anymore, living in silence, closing yourself off from the possibility of happiness. Emily shook her head quickly, her breath uneven. Daniel, this isn't fair. This is too much. I can't, but he didn't let her finish. Yes, you can. Mom, I've seen how you look out the window when the night ends, how you sit at the table with that empty chair beside you. You don't deserve to keep living with nothing but memories. Michael cares about you. He always has. The weight of his words pressed against her chest. Emily pushed back her chair and stood, pacing the room, trying to escape the flood of emotions. The name, the memories, the possibility, it was overwhelming. She stopped near the window, staring at the quiet street outside. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Your father. He would never. Daniel rose to his feet, his voice steady. Dad would want you to live. Mom, he loved you too much to want you trapped in loneliness for the rest of your life. Tears blurred Emily's vision. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window. For years, she had convinced herself that her life had ended the day her husband's did, that she was meant to carry the memories alone, to fill her days with routines that kept her busy but never full. And now, with one conversation, her son was shattering the walls she had so carefully built. Michael. She whispered again, almost to herself. His face came back to her, clearly the kindness in his eyes, the way his laughter carried, the warmth in his presence. She had felt it before, but had buried it deep, telling herself it was nothing. Now it all came rushing back, undeniable. Daniel stepped closer, his voice softer now, as though afraid she might break. He's not trying to replace Dad, he never could. He just wants to be there for you, to talk, to share life again. He wants you to know you're not forgotten. Emily closed her eyes, fighting the war inside her. Part of her wanted to run, to shut the conversation down and protect herself from disappointment. But another part, a quiet, long buried, partaked with longing. Longing to be seen again, to be loved again. To feel alive in a way she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Her knees weakened, and she sat back down at the table, pressing her hand against her chest as if trying to calm her racing heart. Daniel, what if I can't do this? What if it's too late for me? Daniel's eyes softened with compassion. It's never too late, Mom. You're still here. You're still alive, and that means you still deserve joy. His words struck her deeply. She studied his face, her son who had grown into a man wise enough to see her pain and brave enough to confront it. He wasn't just her child anymore. He was the one holding her heart when she was too afraid to. The room fell into silence. Heavy and tender, Emily wiped her tears with the back of her hand. The idea of meeting Michael again terrified her. Yet the thought of continuing her life exactly as it had been terrified her even more. She looked at Daniel, her voice trembling. "He really wants to see me?" "Yes," Daniel replied without hesitation. "He's been waiting, patiently, respectfully, but he's been waiting." Emily's chest rose and fell with a shaky breath. For years, she had believed her story was over, that her chance at love had ended. And now, sitting across from her son, she realized a new chapter might be waiting if only she had the courage to open the door. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table as she whispered, "I don't know if I can face him. I don't know if I'm strong enough." Daniel reached out, covering her hand with his. "You don't have to be strong, Mom. You just have to be willing. That's enough." Emily stared at their hands together, her heart beating so hard it hurt. For the first time in years, the silence in her home didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the beginning of something new. But beginnings were frightening. She lifted her eyes to her son, tears shining in them. "Daniel, I don't know if I'm ready." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "That's okay, Mom. But when you are, he'll be waiting." The words hung in the air, heavy with promise. Emily felt her heart crack open just a little, the possibility of love and life whispering to her through the fear. And in that quiet kitchen, she realized that the past and the future were both standing at her door. The room felt heavy with silence after Daniel's words. Emily sat frozen at the table, her thoughts spinning faster than she could catch them. Her son's hand still rested on hers, steady and warm, anchoring her in the storm of emotions. For years, she had told herself her life was finished in that way, that her role was simply to be a mother, a widow, and nothing more. But tonight, the possibility of something new pressed against her heart, and it terrified her. She looked at Daniel, her voice trembling. "What if I meet him? And it hurts too much? What if I can't handle it?" Daniel's eyes softened, filled with patience. "Then you'll walk away, Mom. But at least you'll know you tried. At least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering." Emily let out a shaky breath. His words cut through her fear, simple but undeniable. He was right. She had spent years avoiding the thought of love, but deep down she knew the loneliness was slowly breaking her. Maybe facing it, even if painful, was better than hiding forever. She rose from her chair and walked toward the window again, staring out at the quiet street. The moonlight stretched across the pavement, and for a moment she imagined what it would feel like to walk beside someone again, to share conversations that weren't just about the past, but about the future. Her heart whispered, something she had buried for years. "You're still alive. You still deserve love." She turned back to Daniel, tears shining in her eyes. "All right, I'll meet him." The smile that spread across Daniel's face was soft, but filled with relief. It wasn't the triumphant smile of someone who had won an argument, but the grateful smile of a son who had carried his mother's pain and finally seen her open a door she had locked shut. He squeezed her hand gently. "You won't regret this, Mom. I promise." The weight in Emily's chest eased just slightly. For the first time in a long time, she felt the faint stirrings of hope that night. Long after Daniel left, she sat alone in her kitchen with the lights dimmed. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel as empty as before. Her mind replayed Daniel's words, the sound of his voice reminding her that she wasn't as invisible as she thought. Someone out there still thought of her. Someone still cared. She went to bed with her heart restless. Turning over memories of Michael, she hadn't allowed herself to revisit in years the way he always asked about her day. The kindness in his laughter, the unspoken warmth that had lingered between them even back then. She wondered what he looked like now, how his voice might sound. If time had changed him, or if the familiarity would return in an instant, the next morning. Emily stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. She brushed her hair slowly, adjusting her blouse, then laughed at herself. "You're being silly," she whispered. But deep down she knew it wasn't silly. She was nervous, like a girl waiting for something she couldn't name. Days passed, and Daniel arranged a simple meeting. "Just coffee. Nothing more?" Emily agreed, though her heart pounded each time she thought about it. When the day finally came, she almost backed out. She sat in her car outside the small cafe, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. She could see through the window Michael was already there, sitting by the corner table. His posture straight, but his hands folded as though he was trying to calm his own nerves. For a moment, Emily thought about driving away. It would be easier, safer. But then she remembered Daniel's words. At least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering. So she opened the door. The bell above the cafe chimed as she stepped inside. Michael looked up, and in that instant, the years melted away. His hair was grayer, his face lined with age. But his eyes the same kind, steady eyes met hers, with a warmth that made her knees weak. "Emily," he said softly. Rising to his feet, her voice caught in her throat, but she managed to smile. "Hello, Michael." They sat across from each other, both nervous, both searching for the right words. At first, their conversation was cautious. "How have you been? It's been so long. Do you still live nearby?" But as the minutes passed, the hesitation faded. Laughter returned, stories flowed.